the 06010.
Welcome to Fantasy Focus. Today's podcast is presented by Geico. You can watch us every weekday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on ESPN's Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube feeds, as well as the ESPN app. And you can download Fantasy Focus wherever you get your podcast. Good Monday morning to you, Field Matthew, Stephania, and Daniel. And you had something you wanted to say.
Well, I'm wearing, for those of you watching the live stream, you can see this, but if you're just listening to the audio podcast, I'm wearing a shirt honoring my friend Jack Attack, of course. Jack Attack LTPF, level the playing field. Of course, Jack Attack, LTPF.com is his website. Jack's a friend of the podcast, Field. We did a Sports-Centered featured on him earlier this year, wrote about him last year in my love-hate. He is a unbelievable special kid. I am wearing this in honor of him for two reasons. Number one is he comes home from the hospital today. He has been in the hospital for about 2.5 months, had to celebrate his birthday there. He's had trouble breathing. The list of physical limitations he currently has is too long to list. It's unbelievable. He is a champion and a warrior, and so my dear friend is coming home from the hospital today, which is an exciting thing for him and his family. So shout out to Jack. And I also wanted to wear it. And if you haven't seen the story or read the article, I would encourage you to do it. Just Google Matthew Berry, Jack Attack, and a link will come up. But the other reason is just because we have just gone through, Field Yates, the worst fantasy football weekend of all time in history. And we're about ready to get into that. And it's brutal. And my Twitter stream and my social media mentions and my texts and my DMs are like, people bemoaning, Najee Harris or Jamar Chase or Joe Mixon or Tom Brady or, a long, long list, right?
Sure.
And I'm one of them. I mean, my teams got demolished this weekend. And we'll get into all that. But I just thought it was worth framing it in the right thing. That ultimately, as disappointing as this weekend was for so many of us, there are greater things at play. And I think perspective sometimes, especially on a day like today, is worthwhile. And so I want you to think about my friend Jack Attack, who is fighting to breathe, who literally needs a machine to help him breathe these days. And still has a smile on his face every single morning.
Sure.
Anyway, I just thought a little bit of perspective, and because it is the day that after 2.5 long months, my friend Jack gets to come home to the hospital to his family. So shout out to the Posnacks and to Jack and his mother Robin. And anyway, just thought some perspective was helpful today.
No doubt about that. And welcome home, Jack. We're so glad to hear that you are going back where you belong. We wish you continued strength during this time. We know you've been battling for a long time and probably have a long battle ahead of you still, but nobody is more courageous than Jack. Jack Attack, LTPF.com. Go ahead and take a look there.
Yeah, check out the feature. Matthew's feature that they did on SportsCenter with Jack was awesome. One of my favorites of all time. So you can still find it. Matthew, do you know where you can find the feature?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you
you could probably scroll and find it in one of our links if you go back to when it aired.
Yeah, I'll tweet it out as well. But like, if you Google Matthew Berry, Jack Attack, honestly, it's on his social feed as well. He's on social media as well. But if you just search Jack Attack, it will come up pretty soon. Jack Posnack, Posnack.
We've got a ton to get to today, and I want to talk about the Monday games and the Tuesday games. Notice I said games in each of those instances, and of course, everything that took place on Sunday. But before we get that, Matthew mentioned just how wild of a Sunday it was this in fantasy. I mean, really, Thursday night, we got plenty of goodness in fantasy. And even Saturday, all things considered, there was really only one guy that you really, really needed, like was an absolute must start on Saturday. That was Jonathan Taylor. And it took until the last play, but he got there as well. I suppose Ramondre Stevenson was a bit of a disappointment.
I was going to say.
But, I mean, Jonathan Taylor must start. Ramondre Stevenson closer to like an RB2. But there were a bunch of guys that were absolute superstars. And Matthew, I'll just take it from here.
I was going to say, I disagree with your assessment on Saturday, if I may.
Okay.
So yes, Jonathan Taylor, RB1, took him till the last 2 minutes, but finally he cashed in for you. Great. I think with Damian Harris out, Ramondre Stevenson, I think, was started by pretty much everyone that had him on the roster. I had him in a lot of leagues. I started him. So obviously a disappointing effort from Stevenson, but also going into that game, the number one defense in fantasy, the New England Patriots.
Right.
5 points didn't really do much, right? They got the interception from Wentz, but otherwise a fairly pedestrian effort from them. Number one kicker in fantasy, Nick Folk. His lowest, I believe it's his lowest output of the season. He had only 5 points as well. And it looked like he might even get that because people were questioning, why did Belichick kick that field goal late? As somebody who had Folk on a roster, I was happy about it. But yeah, I mean, so you had the number one kicker, the number one defense, and a top 20 running back all underperform on Saturday night. And yet that was nothing compared to what was about to come.
That's right. And we pull a lineup of superstars. You can take a look at this lineup constructed right now. It includes a couple of those players you just mentioned, Nick Folk and the Patriots defense. And for those that are watching in the live stream right now, you can see it. But for those that are just listening to the podcast, here is a totally legitimate, if not like the only way this is an unlikely lineup is because it's too good of a lineup to construct on your own. Tom Brady at quarterback with Najee Harris and Cordell Patterson at running back. Your two wide receivers are Jamar Chase and Mike Evans, plus Dawson Knox, and your flex is Alvin Kamara. That team was projected to score at least 10 points in every position and at least 16.8 points at 6 of those 10 spots. The only players under 16.8, Dawson Knox a tight end, Nick Folk a kicker, the Patriots defense, a defense. Projected for 147.6 points in total, Matthew. They came up with 40.3.
So go through that, by the way. You could have actually, if Najee Harris had dropped in your league, like, you know what I mean? Like, and he did in some leagues, but you might have been able to come up with this roster, right? I mean, because you would have gone Kamara in the first and Harris in the second, and then in the third, Mike Evans, and maybe you get Brady in the fourth, because Cordell Patterson, Jamar Chase, Dawson Knox were all basically Chase was a late round draft pick, and Patterson and Knox were basically pickups, as was and Brady was when it's a mid-tier QB1. But think about that. So Tom Brady, I believe, was the number one quarterback in fantasy heading into this, or maybe the number two, right?
One or two, yeah.
Yeah, maybe top quarterback. Najee Harris was a top 5 fantasy running back. Cordell Patterson was a top 8 running back. Jamar Chase and Mike Evans, both top 10 wide receivers. Dawson Knox, a top 5 fantasy tight end. Alvin Kamara, also a top 10 fantasy running back. So 3 running backs inside the top 9. One of the best quarterbacks in fantasy, a top 3 fantasy quarterback. 2 top 10 wide receivers, the number 1 kicker, the number 1 defense, a top 5 tight end, combined for 40 fantasy points. And that doesn't even include Joe Mixon, who's also a top 10 running back, who got to 7 fantasy points. That doesn't include Michael Pittman, who got 1 catch and got ejected. He was wide receiver 22 coming into it. Doesn't include Amari Cooper, who was also a top 25 guy, didn't do anything.
We got a second lineup full.
Doesn't include Dak Prescott. Doesn't include Kyler Murray. Doesn't include Pat Freiermuth. Doesn't include Chris Godwin, who got injured. Doesn't include Leonard Fournette, who got injured.
Right.
On and on and on and on. Here's what I want to tell you, America. I appreciate. Okay, camera's on me. Here we go. Camera 1. I'm looking directly into you. I want to tell you, America, if you lost this weekend, if you lost your playoff game, if you got decimated by the likes of like Hunter Henry, I'm going to tell you something. You're a pretty good fantasy manager. I actually think that winning listen, you obviously wish you would win this week, but honestly, losing this week is probably a testament to how good a fantasy manager you are, because that is a lineup I would have gone into battle with any single time, Field Yates, and it just didn't work out. This is the life we've chosen. You know what I mean? Like, welcome to fantasy football, and we can make some arguments as to whether or not fantasy football is broken on some level, which I kind of think it may be. But what I would just say here is that you didn't do anything wrong, man. It just like the ball didn't go your way. Like you would have collected you'd have picked up Patterson, right? You'd have picked up Dawson Knox. You'd played the waiver wire. You'd made some great draft picks. Jamar Chase was a great draft pick. And yet you're sitting here, or any of the, who thinks Kyler Murray's going into Detroit and laying an egg? That's exactly what, other than Daniel Dopp. Even Daniel Dopp is like...
I had a 5-leg parlay with the Cardinals winning, so it was the only one that didn't hit. I was kind of bummed. But I wasn't, because they freaking looked... Anyways, this is your rant, Matthew.
No, all I'm saying here is that big name superstars did not show up in massive droves. It's the weirdest weekend. I've been playing fantasy sports for over 3 decades. It is the worst weekend in a...
Centuries?
Huh?
6 decades.
6
Wow.
decades.
Yeah, I mean, but 3 that, have been recorded by history.
3 digitally.
Yeah,
right,
3
yes.
digitally. Yeah, obviously. Not even 3 digitally. Like, whatever. But I've been playing a long time. And this is the worst fantasy weekend I've ever seen in terms of big name stars, in terms of what was on the line, in terms of underperformance across the board. Again, going into Monday Night Football, and we've got 4 games still left, but going into Monday Night Football, the number 1 quarterback in fantasy is Tyler Huntley.
Yeah, baby.
Davis Mills is a top 9 fantasy quarterback. Jared Goff is a top 9 fantasy quarterback.
Yeah, how about this lineup? How about this, baby? Here's who you could have started.
Right. Here's
Look
who
at
you could
this.
have started. Look at this.
Check out this lineup here of players.
Okay, so for those of you watching, you can see it, but Field, if you're listening to the podcast,
this lineup was projected to score 84.5 points. Tyler Huntley at quarterback, Duke Johnson at running back, Jeff Wilson Jr., Gabriel Davis, and Russell Gage at wide receiver, James O'Shaughnessy at tight end. Your flex is Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Lions kicker Riley Patterson, and the Texans defense/special teams. That group right there scored 186.9 fantasy points. What are we doing here?
right. I mean,
How is this possible? Here's my
and by the way,
takeaway from this.
not one of them is rostered in more than 50% of ESPN leagues. Maybe Russell Gage is. Russell Gage
he's
likely
just
is.
above, but that's about it. So just my parting shot, to borrow an old Outside the Lines segment, is simply this. 2 things is that, first of all, if you're frustrated this morning, you're not alone. Second of all, the next time you get that itchy Twitter finger and you think, I'm going to go over there and taunt my favorite fantasy analyst because that person had the gumption to tell me to start Tom Brady over Tyler Huntley, think twice about it. This game's tough. This game is tough. It's tough for all of us. I'm not trying to take us off the hook here, but be kind to those you ask advice from.
Also, though, you guys said like 3 of those names on Fantasy Football Now on Sunday morning from that other lineup.
Look,
Matthews' long shot. Yeah.
Marquez Valdez-Scantling was my long shot. If you go and look at my love-hate, Gabriel Davis was on the love-hate.
Yeah.
Marquez Valdez-Scantling was also on the love-hate. Amon-Ra St. Brown was on my love-hate. Right. But by the way, also had Dak Prescott on my love list. Thought he would have, and we'll get into that, but thought the Cowboys offense would absolutely crush a depleted Giants secondary and a banged up Giants defense, and whatever. Thank God the Cowboys have a defense, because otherwise they wouldn't be winning games. That offense does not look good.
All right.
In addition to incredible underperformance, and also some guys, like, again, we liked Marquez Valdez-Scantling. We liked some of these guys, like, no one thought Hunter Henry was going to get 2 touchdowns, right? Brandon Cooks was on the love list. Great. We expected that, but we expected that to be a good game here. But no, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I thought Tyler Huntley would be the number 1 quarterback in fantasy coming, against the Packers.
No pressure, Nick Mullins. You're playing tonight. And let's get to that Monday Night Football games. And we start in Cleveland. Stephania, just a quick update here in terms of who could be available versus who is not available for the Browns, as they have been dealing with COVID issues for about 10 days now.
Well, Baker Mayfield and Case Keenum remain in the protocol. So as you mentioned, it will be Nick Mullins who will be starting for the Browns. And that is a big deal, because this will be his first start this year, but also his first start since coming off of elbow surgery on his throwing arm. So we really haven't seen Nick Mullins other than, a little bit in practicing in during the training camp time. So Nick Mullins gets to start tonight. And as far as Kevin Stefanski, he too is still in the protocol, so it does not appear that he will be available to coach tonight, although we shall see.
And still no Austin Hooper, still no Jarvis Landry for the Browns. They are going to be playing with a very limited group of offensive skill players tonight. They play the Raiders, who are in good shape as far as health is concerned. No Darren Waller. Remember that. No Darren Waller for the Raiders tonight. For the Vikings and the Bears, Stephania, Adam Thielen's the big question mark there. Will we see him tonight, you think?
It's not looking great. I mean, he hasn't done anything in terms of practice. I think if he is active, I know that in speaking with Courtney Cronin, it sounded like they were still holding out hope that he might be available. But if he is active, I think there's concern about how effective he could be. I'll tell you what I did. I made a choice to start someone else in place of Adam Thielen this week, which I referenced on Fantasy Football Now yesterday because I was concerned about how much he'd be able to do. So if I had a choice to play Osborne instead of Adam Thielen, that's what I would do.
And KJ Osborne still available in 60% of leagues, Matthew.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit again. Let's say, listen, week's not over yet. all your guys didn't show up. So if you have some flexibility for night, I do think, again, we're talking high upside, right? We're just trying to swing for the fences here. I do think Donovan Peoples-Jones is sort of interesting tonight against the Raiders. Again, given the lack of other pass catchers here, if you needed I think if you needed a tight end, I feel like I prefer David Njoku to Foster Moreau.
Okay.
In that game. I mean, just,
flip a coin.
It's a little bit of like which one scores the touchdown here, but I prefer to go against the Raiders defense than going against the Browns defense, honestly. And the Raiders offense, they have struggled as of late. I do think Josh Jacobs has a nice game tonight. Vikings Bears here. I think this has a chance to be a sneaky high scoring game. Again, I say that after coming off a Sunday night game, which I also thought might have been, and it was 9-0. So, I mean, who knows, right? But, and Kirk Cousins in prime time is always an adventure. But Bears field are down a lot of guys on their defense, especially in their secondary due to both COVID and injury.
The entire secondary is on the COVID list.
Yeah.
The entire starting Bears secondary is on the COVID-19 list right now.
Yeah, and and their D line, they've got some injuries as well. So the Bears defense, which has struggled so far this year to begin with, is down a lot of guys tonight. So hopefully Kirk Cousins gets it going. I think Jalen Johnson is one of them that is not going to play tonight. He was expected to shadow Justin Jefferson. Not that you were ever benching Justin Jefferson, but listen, if you're down big but you still have Justin Jefferson, don't give up.
Not over
yet.
yet.
It's not over. It's
yet.
not over yet there. And I do think Justin Fields, especially with the rushing, has potential for a big game here.
Let's get to Tuesday Night Football, and Tuesday Night Football is brought to you by Captain Morgan. Bench boring drinks and sub in the captain on game day. Captain Morgan, the official spice rum of the NFL. And on Tuesday night, we have two games, both at 7 p.m. Eastern time. The Los Angeles Rams traveling to Seattle to play the Seahawks, and the Washington football team traveling up to Philadelphia to play the Eagles. Stephania, as far as the West Coast game is concerned, who's in and who's out? Because for a while, it seemed like it was going to be the Rams who'd have more players out that mattered in fantasy. May not necessarily be the case anymore.
Yes, there's some consternation about that. The delay has actually enabled a couple of Rams to be activated. Jalen Ramsey, the most recent activation for the Rams, activated on Sunday off the reserve COVID-19 list. Daryl Henderson, obviously for fantasy purposes, that's a big deal. He was activated on Saturday. Now, remember, Daryl Henderson had that quad injury that caused him to miss a game before, so we don't know exactly where he stands with that. I mean, he's healthier. Certainly, it sounded like he had an opportunity to play in the Monday night game before he was placed on the reserve COVID-19 list. So I expect Daryl Henderson to be there, but how much we see of him, I'm not sure. Tyler Lockett still has a chance to return for the Seahawks. We could find that out as late as tomorrow.
And by the way, also for the Rams, we are going to see OBJ, who was also activated off of the reserve COVID-19 list. I think most people probably saw that news already, but in case you were...
You know what, Field? You know what? I know what I did there? I was thinking about him with the Browns.
Oh, my God.
And then I was like, oh, yeah, the Rams. Yep. He's with the
OBJ.
Rams. OBJ was activated, yes.
He is available as well. By the way, just like a random footnote, Jake Funk, who at one point was classified, I believe by the Rams themselves, to be out for the year, has returned, and he's going to maybe play on Tuesday night.
This is going to be the year of the things like
weird
this happening.
stuff,
I'm just
right?
telling you.
Yeah. Remember that time a few years ago when Ben Roethlisberger was literally ruled out of a game before it even started, and then took over after I think Mason Rudolph got hurt? It was just
like one or two plays in.
Big Ben. There you go. So anyways, as far as the Washington, any thoughts on potential fill-ins specifically for Seattle if Tyler Lockett is unavailable?
Yeah, I think Freddie Swain would be the guy for me. I mean, you're hearing Penny Hart's name, Dwayne Eskridge.
Yep, D.
Right?
Eskridge. Yep,
D. Eskridge. Sorry,
his name is Dwayne. His name is Dwayne. He goes by D.
He goes by D. Right. But anyway, so D. Eskridge as well. But for whatever it's worth, like in the War Room League playoffs, where I have Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase, and Nick Folk. Good times.
Let it all out, yeah.
I had three top players at their position, and all of them combined to get less than Russell Gage. Thanks, what is it, Ambry Thomas? Who's the guy that got burned by Russell Gage?
Thomas. Yeah.
Ambry Thomas. Yeah, thanks. Stephania, can you please cut him in the offseason? That guy's awful. Anyway, because Russell Gage just made him look like an idiot time and time again. Like, put somebody else on Russell Gage, maybe. But what I would say here is that in the War Room League, I have Tyler Lockett. I'm holding out hope that he gets activated for Tuesday night. I definitely really need him. But if he doesn't, I have Freddie Swain in there. So that's who I picked. That's who I think would be the guy that gets the most snaps and would have the most upside opposite DK Metcalf if Lockett does not get cleared.
I want to throw this at you, and I realize this is putting you on the spot, but understanding that KJ Osborne, especially if Adam Thielen doesn't roll tonight, is available in over 60% of leagues, and you have Tyler Lockett, would you rather start KJ Osborne knowing for a fact that he's going to play, or are you going to hold out hope and then roll the dice with Jeff Swain?
No,
Freddie Swain.
It's Freddie Swain.
Sorry.
Jeff Swain's a tight end, but I would do KJ Osborne.
Yeah, same.
Personally, because KJ Osborne has a track record of success, and he's going to play. And we just talked about this. We think it's a really good matchup. Again, this weekend, anything can happen. Who knows? But in theory, the Vikings passing offense has been pretty good all year long, and the Bears passing defense has not been good all year long. And now they're down a bunch of starters from a defense that was middle of the pack to begin with. So in theory, KJ Osborne should have a really nice game tonight. Who knows? But yes, to answer your question, I would make that move. For me personally, in the War Room League, which is a 16-team league, and there's literally no one on the waiver wire, I decided to, instead of starting somebody else, I said I thought the upside of Lockett was worth going in with Swain. I had Ricky Seals-Jones, who ended up, looks like he's not going to play either, but that was my consideration as of Sunday morning. So I thought the upside of Lockett was worth rolling the dice, and then if he doesn't go, I'll go with Swain. But yes, I would go with Osborne.
All right, so a lot to get to. Okay. One more on the Tuesday night front, Stephania, just quickly, as far as Washington and Philly is concerned, who might be available for Washington? Obviously, they've dealt with no shortage of COVID issues themselves.
Yeah, they have Tyler Heineke.
Taylor Heineke, yep.
Taylor Heineke.
I know. One of those days.
You know what's happening?
What is happening, Stephania?
Tyler Huntley,
my brain
Taylor
is
Heineke.
finally, when computers go on the fritz, they just, that's what's happened here. It's done.
Is it finally
it's
done?
exhausted.
You've got too much stuff in there?
I'm spread too thin, and my brain is just squeezed out any form of connection. So, yes, Heineke and Kyle Allen, both on the reserve COVID-19 list, have not come off yet. So I do not anticipate either of them, but you never know. Heineke was put on the list on Friday. Kyle Allen was placed on the list last Wednesday. So if you're looking at timetables, maybe, but with him not practicing, that makes you concerned. Wide receiver Cam Sims was activated off the reserve COVID-19 list. So there's another body available for them. On the other side of the ball, Jalen Hurts. I think this one's interesting because he hurt his ankle in week 12, didn't play week 13, and they had the bye in week 14. And still looked a little sketchy in the middle of last week, but he'd upgraded to full practice on Friday. Yep. They list him as questionable. Well, with the delay, he got another full practice in on Sunday, and now it looks very much like Jalen Hurts will be available for the Eagles.
He'll be good to go. Only one thing I wanted to add there, Stephania, for Washington is not COVID-related, but Terry McLaurin and also J.D. McKissick.
Yeah, J.D. McKissick with the concussion issue, and you're not going to see J.D. McKissick. And Terry McLaurin, yes, you will see Terry McLaurin, I believe.
That's good news. He obviously has been dealing with the concussion himself. He was a full participant in practice.
He was only waiting on the INC clearance, but my guess is the fact that, the problem is we don't get the reports since then. He would have had to have that between Friday and the Sunday game. With it being delayed, we anticipate that it would have happened.
So he'll be shadowed by Darius Slay, and who knows who's throwing him the ball, but still Terry McLaurin, who has, in the past, when he's been shadowed by, some of the top corners, has won those matchups more often than not. So sort of depends on what your other options are here. I'm disappointed that Jalen Hurts is going to start only from this perspective as both a Washington football team fan and also because if Heineke could get cleared, it might be fun. Heineke versus Minshew would be. Now that's a football game. That would have been fun. But fantasy manager wise, obviously you guys know I love Jalen Hurts, and he's been nothing short of terrific. Worth noting though, Washington has gotten they got Daron Payne back, and they've gotten a number that Montez Sweat is going to come back. So they've gotten
Jonathan Allen,
and Jonathan Allen as well. And so sorry, they got Jonathan Allen back. Daron Payne wasn't on the list, but they've gotten a number of their defensive starters back. Not all of them, but it certainly looks a lot less dire for the Washington defense than it did previously, which might damper the enthusiasm for Miles Sanders and some of the skill players on Philadelphia's side of the ball. Worth noting, just for whatever it's worth, Ron Rivera did say to the press yesterday that he thought that both Kyle Allen and Taylor Heineke, in that order, I believe, their numbers were trending up in terms of, that like they haven't been cleared yet. They haven't been,
ruled out.
They haven't been ruled out yet. But anyway, there's optimism. I wouldn't know that it's strong optimism, but there's still a chance that one of those two could play for Washington, and you'd feel a lot better if either one of them were under center versus Garrett Gilbert. No disrespect to Garrett, but he just got there.
All right, so that's a lot to get into in our opening block. We're going to come back and talk about...
and Ricky Seals-Jones didn't practice this weekend. So I know we were talking about him earlier in the week as a potential tight end streamer, but I would look elsewhere because it doesn't look like he's going to play, and if he does, he might be limited. Last game, he split snaps basically with John Bates.
If you thought that was a lot of information, just wait till we get to the injuries, which start in just a moment. Before we get there, do you own or rent your home?
Sure
you do. And I bet it can be hard work.
Oh, you got no idea.
You know it's easy, though. Bundling policies with Geico.
Really?
Geico makes it easy to bundle your homeowner's renter's insurance along with your auto policy. It really is. It's a good thing, too. Well, it's a good thing because you already have so much to do, well, not around your home, but like the office, perhaps.
Yeah.
Go to geico.com, get a quote, and see how much you could save. It's Geico easy. Visit geico.com today. That's geico.com.
A bunch of athletes have made 2021 their retirement year. Drew Brees, Jason Witten, Greg Olson.
Myself.
Matthew Berry.
Yeah.
Decided to hang up his cleats.
Yeah. Well, they've always been hanging up, but I finally decided to,
turn in that retirement paperwork officially.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what? To replace these players, teams need to draft a new player, probably a rookie even, and that takes time and energy. Do you know who can relate? Employers who are trying to staff their teams back up right now. ZipRecruiter gets it. That's why they help making find talent for you easier and faster. And right now you can try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/06010. How does ZipRecruiter's hiring game plan work? Well, their matching technology finds qualified candidates and proactively presents them to you. Then you can easily review these recommended candidates and invite your top choices to apply for your job. That encourages them to apply faster. It's no wonder that ZipRecruiter is the #1 rated hiring site in the United States based on G2 ratings. In fact, ZipRecruiter's technology is so effective that 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. So, retire those other job sites and use the one that works fast, ZipRecruiter. Right now, you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/06010. Once again, that exclusive web address is ZipRecruiter.com/06010.
Moving forward here to the injuries, and we turn over to Stephania now. And Stephania, as Matthew mentioned, the Bucs just by themselves had a ton of injuries. Let's go to Sunday Night Football. Landon Fournette and Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. What information do we have available about each of those players who all left the game, and they were each ruled out pretty darn quickly as well?
Yeah, I know. And there goes all your offensive skill positions practically. And Leonard Fournette, just yesterday, I was talking about how he'd found this new life with the Buccaneers and the ankle injury that had been such a problem for him at the Jaguars. He'd seemingly gotten past that, other than dealing with a minor ankle issue before it. Look what Leonard Fournette could do when he was healthy, and then he leaves yesterday's game with a hamstring injury. The severity not yet clear, so whether he will miss time or not, we do not know yet. Mike Evans also dealing with a hamstring injury, and we've heard that it's potentially not very serious, but you never know what that means. Again, Mike Evans has a history of dealing with soft tissue injuries himself, particularly hamstrings. So that's another one that I want to wait and see what happens over the next few days and get a better sense of it. Chris Godwin was really the scariest looking injury of all. Really awkward fall. I mean, I was worried about his head and neck. He ended up getting hit low in the knee at one point and suffered an MCL injury, which is exactly what you expect with the nature of that kind of contact. And his knee bent inwards, and that damages that ligament. Now, Rick Stroud of the Tampa Bay Times reporting just an hour ago that despite suffering the MCL sprain, no decision has been made by the Buccaneers as to whether they will place him on injured reserve, which would effectively end his regular season.
Yeah, it would end.
Yeah. So that decision apparently has not been made yet. But either way, it certainly sounds like for fantasy purposes, especially at this time of year, the playoffs, your championship, I would not be counting on Chris Godwin.
Yeah, a couple of factors. So just to reiterate, any player on injured reserve, as we know, 3 weeks minimum, and because there are now 3 weeks left, they could place him on injured reserve. He could return in the postseason, which the Bucs are certainly heading towards, but not going to be available for the rest of this regular season. It sounds like for Week 16, which I'm not trying to be crass about injuries, but like we are week to week ourselves as it pertains to fantasy management. It sounds like there's a chance you could have Evans or Fournette. There's also it seems like there's a better chance than not that Chris Goblin will be unavailable in Week 16. So that's the takeaway for right now. We'll discuss more on the replacements in Tampa Bay if there are going to be them Tuesday and Wednesday of this week. A reminder, because of the fact that the games have been pushed back to Tuesday night, waivers will now be running a day later on ESPN.com.
And this is the other piece of this. If you play in a league in where your waivers are 2-day waivers, in other words, so in a normal week, your waivers, basically you put them in on Wednesday and they run first thing like Thursday morning, like 3 a.m. Thursday morning, Wednesday night into Thursday. They will now run Thursday night. And so, yes, the Thursday night game players won't be available.
Right.
So like if you were picking up, I'm trying to make it, the Titans
Dontrell Hilliard.
Yeah, I was just going to say Dontrell Hilliard or whatever, Chester Rogers or somebody, Nick Westbrook-Aquino, right? Then those guys are, and they were available in your league. They won't be because they'll be locked until Friday morning, right? And then the game will have already played. So
I think that's it's very uncommon, but if you do play in a league like that, maybe consider approaching your commissioner this week and see if you can modify that for this week and this week only, or potentially have that commissioner retroactively allow you to add that player to your roster. Hopefully you can sort it out, but part of the reason why you might be interested in a player like Nick Westbrook-Aquino or Chester Rogers is because, Stephania, yet again, Julio Jones is dealing with a hamstring injury.
I know. I looked at Daniel because I was waiting for some smart remark from Daniel about Julio Jones. But, I mean, this one really hurts. Such a talented player. He works so hard. I really want for him to be able to get past this and be healthy. But the hamstring's been an issue essentially since the start of the year and really going back to last year. And unfortunately, a hamstring injury yet again yesterday at a point where he had been doing so much more in practice and working so much harder and really thought this was going to be a game where he could put it behind him. But again, this is the proof. I always say it's getting through a game and being able to look back afterwards and say, yep, I went 100% and I didn't have a setback. And this is the way hamstring injuries work. So unfortunately, a hamstring injury ended the day early for Julio Jones. And boy, it's just going to be hard to have any confidence with the short amount of time left in the season. It doesn't mean the Titans won't use him down the road, and certainly if they go to the playoffs. But for fantasy purposes, I would say it's probably time to move on.
Yeah, and the conversation for Julio might need to be more about 2022 than anything else right now.
Well,
Stephania.
and it's a really interesting conversation to have because he had an off season from last year when it was such a problem in Atlanta. And you remember he was up and down, I think, 3 different times last year during the season. And so it's really hard when you have a player who's doing everything possible. This guy is incredibly tough. We could go back to his days at Alabama and how he played, kind of set the new stage for how you play after a broken bone in your hand because of how quickly he came back. So when I hear people questioning Julio's toughness when it comes to something like this, it bothers me a great deal because there's nothing to do with that.
Never question Julio's toughness.
That's not you. I'm speaking to all the people out there who are doing just that. And this is not something where you're tough and you push through it. This is a chronic soft tissue injury that usually is the result of repeated insults to the tissue, progressive scar tissue, and a player who's getting older. So I hope for him that he can find a way to get past this.
I just like the phrase repeated insults to the
just
tissue.
Thinking that.
That's why in medicine we talk about it.
Your sweater is ugly.
Well, is that where the phrase adding insult to injury comes from?
I don't know. Maybe
it probably does, right?
I mean, it does.
Yeah, there you go.
Because we talk about like you're insulting the tissue in medicine if you keep, it suffered multiple insults.
Oh.
Yeah.
I learned something today.
Exactly.
I don't like
I learned
you,
something every
hamstring.
day from Stephania.
Yeah.
I'm. You know what? I feel like on Reddit, I am Julio Jones's hamstring.
Yes.
Just in terms of the insults I suffer. Hey, real quickly, Stephania, just to be very clear here on this. Very clear. I was never questioning Julio Jones' toughness.
I wasn't directing it at you.
I know you weren't. I just want to be clear here. What I was questioning was a certain member of the Fantasy Football Now cast taking Julio Jones over Chase Claypool. yesterday in red zone.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was
because Chase Claypool had such a huge day.
12 yards more than Julio. That's all. It's a W, baby.
This is actually funny. This is actually funny. There was a red zone question yesterday. Who would have more receiving yards, Julio Jones or Chase Claypool? Julio obviously finished with 0. Chase Claypool also had 0 catches. He just had 12 receiving yards off of a lateral play yesterday.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
This is Matthew gloating about anything possible, eking out a win.
We'll have to find the standings.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah, what are the standings?
The standings are important. What's important here is that
you got the right answer.
You defended Julio Jones yesterday, and you were wrong.
Okay, we got to keep moving. We have so much to get to, and it's already 11:30.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
Sorry. So, Stephania, keep things moving here. It's bad when you know it, and it's exactly what you think right from the moment you see it. And I'm not a doctor, but I knew the minute Sterling Shepard went down exactly what happened.
Yeah, it's like a flat tire when you have these Achilles tears, and oftentimes you see a player just do exactly that. They just go down. There's nothing there to push off of when they rupture their Achilles. And it's interesting. Sterling Shepard was listed on Friday's practice report with a calf injury. I don't yet know if this was the same side, and maybe there was a little foreboding if it was that this was a problem area. And he's another guy I really feel for. Multiple soft tissue injuries over time. And, he's worked hard to come back from 2 lower extremity injuries already this year and now this. So wish him all the best in his recovery. Here's the good news. If you've been watching Cam Akers' Instagram posts, you can see that these athletes are coming back from Achilles injuries and playing. Look at Deontay Foreman, by the way, who is written off by so many and who is back. So Sterling Shepard, you will come back from this.
Sterling Shepard, obviously out for the rest of this year. We wish him well for 2022. Pat Freiermuth, Stephania, for the Steelers, left the game yesterday due to a concussion injury.
Yeah, and really, you guys know the rules by now. Goes into the concussion protocol. Yep. Non-linear progression, something we keep an eye on.
I will say this, I don't know if this is worth adding or not, but obviously people know Pat Freiermuth from Massachusetts, where I am from as well. Mike Lynch, who is a legendary sports anchor there, texted with Pat's brother yesterday and shared the text online. Pat is driving us home. He is all good right now. So
there you go.
Anyway, just for what it's
good.
worth, right? Yeah,
that's good.
Yep. Not saying there's anything specific about what his timeline is, just passing it along as a piece of context for Pat Freiermuth. The Steelers play the Chiefs on Sunday. This was a scary one, Stephania, Teddy Bridgewater, but a positive update just moments ago on the Broncos quarterback.
Was the positive update that he was released from the hospital?
Released from the hospital, yes. He has entered the NFL's concussion protocol. I had not
seen that yet, but judging from that he was taken to the hospital for observation, precautionary purposes, a head injury, taken off on a spine board. We know the scenes by now. It's scary. They do everything to ensure protection of the head, neck, and spine when there's a suspected injury, appeared to have lost consciousness for a sustained period of time. Here's the other thing about Teddy Bridgewater. He had a concussion injury in week 4. And so, this is another one in the same season, just something to keep in mind.
Teddy Bridgewater, as I just said, he is in concussion protocol. He's been released from the hospital. To add on what Stephania just said, let's hope that he is back on the field sooner rather than later, but most importantly, that he is healthy sooner rather than later. Drew Lock would start for Denver. Drew Lock finished the game yesterday, and he was uneven, which is what he has often been on the football field. A couple of decent plays, and then some mind-numbing mistakes as well. Let's move forward here, Stephania, to Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon for the Bengals left the game late. He actually at one point jogged back to the locker room. The amount of time he spent there suggests he might have just been going to the bathroom, but then he came back in, and then he got off the field again with some sort of injury.
Yeah, they're calling it a left ankle injury, according to the Bengals official site, but there really hasn't been any news on it. For what it's worth, he returned for the final kneel down of the game. Did not appear to be limping afterwards, but did not appear pleased, I'm told. So take that for what it's worth.
Yeah, well, he has himself in fantasy. So, I don't blame it. He has himself, and he has Jamar Chase in fantasy.
Come on.
So
more
he was annoyed.
Later.
Samaje Perine is the next man up in that backfield. Again, more to come on the waiver shows both tomorrow and Wednesday. Okay, so we're going to come back and we're going to rip through as much stuff as we possibly can. But before we do that, everyone likes shopping online, but searching for coupon codes is kind of a bummer.
Oh, man.
So make saving online a breeze with Capital One Shopping. Capital One Shopping is a free tool that instantly searches for available coupon codes and automatically applies them at checkout. Just download Capital One Shopping for your computer and let it do the work for you. So easy, and you don't even need a Capital One card to use it. Capital One Shopping. It's kind of genius. What's in your wallet? Saving and available coupons vary.
'Tis the season, football fans. Detroit is 2-11-1, and DraftKings, The official daily fantasy partner of the NFL is giving you the shot to stuff your stockings with big cash prizes. This Christmas week, new customers can play for free for millions with their first deposit. This gift sure beats tube socks and underwear we all remember unwrapping as a kid. Playing daily fantasy football is simple. Just pick your lineup of NFL stars while staying under the salary cap and score enough points to bring home cash. And with a free shot at millions of dollars in total prizes, taking in the NFL action this week will certainly be jolly. DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. And best of all, you can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want. So download the DraftKings app now and use promo code FFF to play for free for millions. That's right. Enter promo code FFF to get a free shot at millions of dollars in total prizes with your first deposit. Don't miss out on the Christmas treat. Download DraftKings and play with the official daily fantasy partner, the NFL. Minimum $5 deposit required. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com for details.
We talked about how Week 15 has been just straight up weird. In some ways, it was a good weird, too, because Duke Johnson all of a sudden came out of nowhere as Duke Johnson, a guy who has been a fantasy football community favorite for some time, was elevated from the Dolphins practice squad this past week, early in the week, as a matter of fact. And then he went off on Sunday. Duke Johnson played 40 snaps, 25 for Myles Gaskin, very few for Savon Ahmed. He led the Dolphins in rushes, in rushing yards, in rushing touchdowns, in fantasy points. He had 22 carries for 110 yards and 25.7 fantasy points because he scored twice. Matthew, on the one hand, Myles Gaskin got like one practice in this past week. He's been on the COVID list for a week prior to that. On the other hand, the Dolphins have been looking for a spark in their backfield all season long. This is the best we've seen a Dolphins running back look all year. Is this for real for Duke Johnson?
Well, it's interesting. So there was a notification, I believe it was Schefter reporting
that the active roster.
He's been signed to the active roster as well. So yes, like certainly he looked good. Again, he played the Jets. Pretty much everyone looks good against the Jets, especially running backs, right? There is that. I thought about starting him. I legit thought about starting him, and then I didn't because I'm just like, am I really like in a playoff week going to start a guy that had touched the ball literally four times this entire year prior to this past Sunday, right? And by the way, the last time this is the first time in his entire career that he's had 2 rushing touchdowns. He hasn't had a 25-point fantasy game since 2018. But yeah, Duke Johnson looked the part. Again, it was against the Jets. And we've seen this before, Field, in the sense of that we've seen like Myles Gaskin have a huge game for the Dolphins. And then the very next week, the usage isn't there. Also keep in mind, no Jalen Waddle in this game either, right? A big part of their offense.
But Duke barely caught the ball.
What?
Duke barely caught the ball yesterday.
No, I understand that, but I'm just saying in terms of trying to figure out ways if you're the Dolphins and trying to figure out ways to move the ball, Jalen Waddle, if he's on the field, is going to be an option more often than not. He's not there. So you've got Gesicki, you've got Devontae Parker, Isaiah Ford. Like, you're not, you know what I mean? Like, and because, again, the Jets are such a bad run defense that, he cashed in a couple of short touchdowns, which is nice. Here's what I would say, though. I am sure he's going to make your waiver wire column. Obviously, he has to. But you sort of look at it.
Saints, Titans, Patriots.
Saints, Titans, Patriots.
Yeah. It's a tough one here.
I mean, like, how confident are you starting Duke Johnson next week after Myles Gaskin sits a full week of practice against the Saints?
Right.
So now you're into week 17 against the Titans. And the Titans, who just shut down Najee Harris. The Titans have been a better defense than more often than not this year. Boy, oh boy. And then if you play in week 18, you ain't starting them against the Patriots. Just stop it. Yeah. I get it. Jonathan Taylor ran for a lot, but Duke Johnson ain't
Jonathan Taylor. Prior to that long run, though, Jonathan Taylor had like 25 runs for like 103 yards.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Like, you're all sitting there. I know, playing against him. I was like, this is amazing, right? I'm playing against him, too. I'm like, this is awesome. He was contained until the last play of the game.
In the War Room League, I'm playing Teddy Bruschi, who has Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah.
And I was just like, yeah. And then,
this is awesome, right?
Then, of course, the Patriots defense are like, listen, Teddy, we got you.
Yeah.
We're gonna take the bad angle. Jonathan Taylor can run for a 16-point play. We got you, Teddy Bruschi. So,
right,
what are you going to do? I can't compete against that.
Let's keep moving forward here. And
I'm joking, by the way, in case anyone thinks that was actually real. So watch some internet say that. Teddy Bruschi did not call anyone in the Patriots defense, and I assure you,
Reliable
the Patriots
internet.
defense was not happy about giving up that big touchdown run to Jonathan Taylor.
There were some injuries that we knew about coming into Week 15 that would have an impact, and one of them was that T.J. Hawkinson was out. The Lions' thin group of pass catchers got even thinner, and yet a star may have been born in Detroit recently. As Amon-Ra St. Brown just continues his red-hot play. How about this? Over the past 3 games, Kyle looked this up. I don't know how many receivers have, please, I should say. I don't know how many receivers have more catches than Amon-Ra St. Brown. 10, 8, and 8 in his past 3 games. That's good for 26 over the past 3 weeks for Amon-Ra St. Brown, who had 23.5 fantasy points. He found the end zone yesterday, and perhaps most importantly, Stephania Bell is thriving in the Scott Fish Bowl playoffs. First in her division right now on the strength of putting Amon-Ra St. Brown into her lineup.
Yeah, it was a really nice call there by Stephania. 11 targets this week for him, 12 targets each of the previous 2 weeks. We talked about him on Fantasy Football Now a lot yesterday. Yet another reason why you should watch Fantasy Football Now every Sunday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern to 1 p.m. Eastern. It's Field, it's Stephania, it's myself, it's Mike Clay, it's Damian Woody, it's Dan Graziano, it's Michelle Steele, it's Lindsay Theory, it's Jeff Darlington, it's Ed Werder. It's pretty much everyone you want to. Adam Schefter, of course. It's pretty much Diana Rossini's great. It's pretty much everyone you want to hear from at ESPN on a fantasy football morning. And so Amon-Ra St. Brown got brought up quite a bit over the course of the show. He also made the love list as well. Daniel, you are not a part of Fantasy Football Now.
No.
So I wanted to give you a moment here just to discuss Amon-Ra St. Brown and your victorious Detroit Lions.
How fantastic.
Yeah.
In all honesty, there's not a lot of, like, the fantasy outlook for me right now is, first off, I hate to say this, but Shefty was right. I mean, Craig Reynolds, like, what are they doing with him? And he is just crushing it.
Yeah.
However,
Great call by Shefty. Yep.
I will say this. I've never seen a team that was 0-9 continue to fight for a coach the way that the Lions have for Dan Campbell. And I love his aggressiveness. There are times on 4th down where it's just like, I get it. Conventional wisdom is like, you got a punt here. Guess what? We're 1-11-1. Let's go for it. Let's try some things. I freaking love it. I am so unbelievably stoked, and being able to see him. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Matthew, like you said, double-digit targets, 12, 12, and 11. Is this something that as a fantasy manager, if I need to pick someone up for an injured player or a flex play, do you think that this is something that could potentially continue with the Lions schedule, or are you still a little worried about it?
I'm not worried at all. First off, just to the eye test, kid can play.
Yes.
Right? I mean, kid can absolutely play. So first off, there's just that. Secondly, do we think the Lions are mostly going to be in negative game script or in games in which they have to your point, be aggressive?
Yes.
We do. Also, and while Craig Reynolds is a great story, they don't have DeAndre Swift. We'll see if they get Jamal Williams back next week, but they're devoid of players that are making plays with no TJ Hawkinson for the rest of the year. You know, look, they've gotten a couple of moments here from Josh Reynolds. They've gotten some nice moments from Khalif Raymond, but Amon-Ra St. Brown, this is a young team, and he's obviously somebody that they're going to build around. He's a 4th-round rookie who is proving himself quite adeptly. So yes, fantasy-wise, do I think this production is legit? I do. I managed to trade for him in our Dynasty League, which I'm very happy about.
Ooh. By the way, over the past 3 weeks, he is 3rd in the NFL in terms of catches. Only Chris Godwin and George Kittle have more catches than Amon-Ra St. Brown. Pretty good company to keep right there. The other side of this game, again, the Lions won by 18 points. 18 points, anybody missed it, over the previously 10-3 Arizona Cardinals.
By the way, not that close.
No.
I mean, like, it's not like they got a couple of lucky bounces, something like that. The Lions legit dominated Arizona yesterday.
Great to see.
It was weird.
Stephania, the Cardinals did have both of their running backs yesterday. Did they come out okay, Chase Edmonds and James Conner?
As far as we know, they came out okay. We obviously, the concerns going in where James Conner had injured his ankle in the Monday night game, late in the game. We didn't really know how he would look, and they obviously went into that game yesterday not wanting to overwork him, but not wanting to overwork Chase Edmonds either, who is seeing his first game action since coming off injured reserve for an ankle injury. They kind of split the carries. I think it was 8 for James Conner and 6 for Chase Edmonds. So, but it was just, like you said, it was a weird game.
Yeah, I think that a couple of things I learned here is, first of all, like, there's some elements that you have to throw out. Like, they were just a complete non-factor in the red zone yesterday. They scored just 1 touchdown, and that came late, did Arizona. Second thing is that, like, the dreams of James Conner holding onto that job basically unto himself, those were never really anything more than a dream, as Stephania just said. 31 snaps for James Conner yesterday. 29 for Chase Edmonds. This will probably be more of a committee than it will be a one-man attack. I think there's more upside, though, than yesterday showed. Both running backs for the Broncos came into yesterday's game a bit banged up, Stephania. It sounds like all clear there after what they did yesterday.
Yeah, and we told you, when they're both playing, they split the workload.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty much right down the middle in terms of the volume of work that they see. Melvin Gordon might be catching fewer passes of late, but the workload was pretty well divided between Gordon and Williams yesterday.
And they, I mean, like, it's not even just yesterday. It's all year long. Right. It's incredible what they continue to do with these two players.
When they're both healthy, we tell you, it goes right back to that. Like, even though Javonte Williams had this amazing performance recently, it's still when Melvin Gordon's back in, there it goes.
And it seems pretty clear, too, by the way, like the calculus here for the Broncos is that Melvin Gordon is more likely to score a touchdown. Javonte Williams is more likely to have 3 to 4 catches. When Melvin Gordon doesn't score a touchdown, he's going to be hard to start. It's hard to predict when but it's also hard to predict when that's going to happen. Right. Javonte Williams might have like a slightly safer floor as the result of that passing game work, but maybe Melvin has more upside, which sounds crazy because I think we believe that Javonte Williams has a brighter future in this league. Sure. But I think right now that's kind of how it works in that Denver Broncos backfield. Stephania, your 49ers, again, they won yesterday.
By the way, Javonte Williams was still was able to score more points than Joe Mixon or Jamar Chase.
Wow, you sound better.
Combined. I may know that because I have Joe Mixon and Jamar Chase in War Room, and was playing against Javonte Williams, so I may have been following that very closely. By the way, Jamar Chase had 3 less fantasy points than CJ Uzomah. That's right. Yeah, Teddy was starting C.J. Uzomah.
It's a 16-team league.
It's a 16-team league.
Yeah.
And yet C.J. Uzomah, who had 4.3 points, still better than Jamar Chase.
Who was his defense?
His defense was the Patriots' defense.
So he got an awful week from them?
He got 5 from the Patriots' defense.
Terrible week, yeah.
Huh?
Who was his kicker?
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Who was his kicker? Just indulge me. Who's his kicker?
His kicker was Ryan Suckup.
How about his quarterback?
His
quarterback?
Trevor Lawrence.
Okay, yeah. So these things,
whatever.
Life has balance, doesn't it?
The point is, but those guys stink.
When Matthew paints a picture by himself, it looks so different than when it's a collaborative picture between him and Field. It's so strange.
Look,
Matthew wants to tell the story he wants to tell. Just let him go.
Right. You're damn right. Trevor Lawrence stinks, right? I mean, Trevor Lawrence is not fantasy wise. Did I say anything wrong?
No, you're
fantasy wise. Listen, it's a 16-team league, so we all have
painted into a corner. We
all get painted into a corner.
I got it.
No, we all do. Seriously, there's not a lineup in this league where top to bottom you're like there's not a hole. Every single team has holes.
My team is, I think, on pace to lead the consolation bracket after 1 week. So you might have to reconsider.
So you guys are, but we all have ugly holes. But all I'm saying is that so you count on your stars to step up for you, and when Joe Mixon and Jamar Chase and Ramondre Stevenson, who are 3 of my stars on that team, can't even beat Russell Gage, who Teddy started, then you're like, come on.
Yeah, but yes, who else beat
Javonte Williams was not good, but he was 5 points better than Joe Mixon. What?
I said, do you know who else beat Russell Gage?
Jeff Wilson, I think.
Yes, he did, Stephania
Bell.
Yeah,
he did. Jeff Wilson.
Right.
Moving us along. Yeah, I'm taking a chapter out of the Daniel book.
Well done there. I love it. Right. And Jeff Wilson, this was inexplicable to me this past week. Obviously, you guys know I write the waiver column, and I don't know how he wasn't added in more leagues. He's still available in 63% of leagues. Is Jeff Wilson Jr. that better change, especially because the 49ers play on a short week this week? They play Thursday night.
That's right.
Elijah Mitchell hasn't practiced in 2 weeks, Stephania. There's seemingly little chance he plays on Thursday, right?
Before it had looked encouraging, coming out of the concussion, he was out doing some work on the side. But just recently, Kyle Shanahan said he's dealing with some swelling in his knee that's been sticking around. And as long as there's swelling in his knee, I'm telling you, that's that. They're not going to put him back out there, and they're certainly not going to put him out on a short week. So.
And especially, why would they right now?
Why would you?
Right? Jeff Wilson Jr. is plenty good. He is certainly serviceable. If you have Jeff Wilson Jr., you should feel comfortable starting him. This one was tough, though. Michael Carter returned for the Jets yesterday, and he played the most snaps amongst running backs. Problem was he barely did anything. He had just 1 catch and had 3 fantasy points. I don't think there was an injury. I don't think there was an injury issue, Stephania. I just think he wasn't that good yesterday for an offense that's sort of unpredictable, right? Yes. You were to the point.
He played up to the level of his offense is pretty much what happened.
That's right. The Cowboys had... Zeke is not on the injury report, Stephania. We just know he's banged up. Meanwhile, Tony Pollard came into the game questionable to play. He did give it a go. Did both of them come out okay as well?
As far as we know, Zeke has definitely said that he's been feeling better from this PCL sprain. We talked about him wearing a brace for the first time a week ago. I think he's getting more comfortable with it. Tony Pollard, I was more worried that something could go wrong, right? We know he's dealing with a partially torn plantar fascia, and we just didn't know how he would be able to get through a game, but he seems to have done all right.
All right, so that was he certainly looked at the most explosive player in the offense again, Daniel.
Yeah, and I want to ask you a question about that because again, he had less snaps than Zeke, still had more yards. Yeah. I realize there's nothing to do about it necessarily for this year, but like when is Tony Pollard's contract up?
This is his second season, so he's got 2 more after this. Zeke has like 5 more after this.
Okay. Yeah. So there's not the chance of him potentially going to another team and seeing maybe more fantasy outlook not behind Ezekiel Elliott for the next at least year or two.
I think the more likely path to him being a starter is the Cowboys making a business decision on Zeke sooner than the end of his contract and him being elsewhere and Tony Pollard taking over the Dallas job.
Yeah, not rooting for anything. It's just like this kid is so explosive. He's fun to watch, man.
He's talented.
When can the Cowboys get out of that contract? Can they do it after this year?
They can do it anytime. It's gonna, there's gonna be some pain involved there. I would think it's a more likely conversation based off of the current construction of the deal after next season. Mighty guess, but we'll see. I mean,
Pollard's signed through next year, 2022.
We're talking about Zeke.
Sorry,
okay, so there's one more year for Tony Pollard after this. So we'll see. Will be a really interesting conversation going forward. James Robinson yesterday played a bunch for the Jaguars with Carlos Hyde out, and of course Urban Meyer no longer the head coach. He had 18 carries. That was tied for his best this season in a single game.
I thought it was weird, though, that he showed up at the game. Did you see him? Urban Meyer, so he was wearing a wig, but he was in the end zone when a player scored, when the Jaguars scored. I don't know if you saw it, but that was Urban Meyer.
That was him?
That was Urban Meyer wearing a wig. He was there in the corner, just sort of checking everything out.
Did he have to provide a ticket to the gate, or do you wave a security badge? Like, how do you get in when you're the former coach?
I think they forgot to take it from him, so he came back, and so... He hadn't seen the Jaguars score, so he was just like, oh, wait, we're close to the end zone. Let me go down there and check it out. Let me go see what's going on.
I thought you were going to say he didn't recognize James Robinson.
That also would have been a good line.
3 catches for James Robinson yesterday, 88 yards, a touchdown, 17.8 fantasy points. Like, solid day. Like, certainly the points were good. Like, the rushing attempts were good. Like, this is a good sign we see going forward. And the schedule next week shapes up nicely for another big day for James Robinson. He plays the Jets next Sunday.
Yes.
The Ravens, man, they lost. That was not good. But I am super impressed with what they have continued to do during all these injuries. They have just been thinned out so severely. No Lamar Jackson yesterday. And yet, if you play fantasy and you started 2 out of the 3 guys that we think are still startable right now, specifically Marc Andrews or Hollywood Brown, you feel pretty good about it, especially Marc Andrews with 35.6 fantasy points. He's unbelievable right now. He's now, how about this? He's the first tight end ever for the Ravens to have over 1,000 receiving yards in a single season.
Marc Andrews versus George Kittle versus Travis Kelce for tight end 1 next year is a real conversation.
I said
Spider-Man
at the start
meme, right?
Yeah.
I have been a huge Marc Andrews fan. Yeah, I think you can vouch for this, Matthew. I have drafted him.
Absolutely.
Yes.
After he scored his second touchdown, Stefan yesterday, Stefan was like, you know what? I'm finally in on Marc Andrews.
I did not understand.
So ever since the second half of yesterday, Stefania has been a massive, massive Marc Andrews fan.
Guess who has him on her Scott Fishbowl team?
Yeah, there you go.
So listen, I've been a fan of Marc Andrews. I have tried to draft him in multiple leagues. And I remember at the start of this season that he was just, I don't know if it's like not the sexy tight end name, but he was always the distant. There were a lot of people who didn't put him in the same category as Kittle. I thought he could be there.
Don't look at me. I had him at 4.
We had Travis Kelce as the top, right? But the Darren Waller, George Kittle, and Marc Andrews, they should be in the same conversation.
And Hawkinson was up there as well, and so
James O'Shaughnessy.
No, I'm just saying, like in the preseason, those guys were right.
Yeah.
And a lot of people had Kyle Pitts at 4. What?
Mo Alley Cox.
James
Matthew's
Shaughnessy,
favorite.
Ricky Seals-Jones.
Yes.
Yeah, just all my obscure tight ends that I
want to ask
Logan
a real quick question.
I was high on Logan Thomas coming to the year.
That
as well.
was legit. He was great before he got hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was. That was a good call.
Yeah,
I want to ask one.
but you guys made fun of Logan Thomas last year. I kept talking about him in the preseason last year.
Yeah.
That ended up working out. And 2 years ago, I talked up Darren Waller in the preseason.
We're
a lot.
going down the
And that one
Cordell
worked
Patterson
out.
path. This is who I talked about 7 years ago.
Yeah.
I had
Cordell
Johnny.
Patterson is who I talked about 7 years ago. Should have paid attention, Stephania, 7 years ago. You should write down every single person I talk about, and then at some point, I promise you, eventually they'll be good. Time is a fluid concept.
I thought it was a flat
in
circle.
terms of fantasy analysis.
Yeah.
That's what I've determined here. Real talk though, for 1 second. Two things here. Number one is, Andrews is amazing, and there's a conversation to be had in the offseason about whether Kelsey, Andrews, or Kittle is the number one tight end, or Waller. Let's see how he finishes the season.
Yeah.
But to me, the biggest thing about the Ravens, twofold. Number one is, to your point about John Harbaugh, I agree with you. John Harbaugh is going to get no Coach of the Year votes. But given the fact that, and he's getting a lot of criticism for going for fourth down and the two losses to the Packers and the Steelers, John Harbaugh should be in that conversation, given all the injuries they've dealt with and the fact that they're still competitive and they came basically within 1 point of the Packers, who are probably going to be the number one seed of the NFC. Harbaugh deserves to be nominated in that category. No one's going to mention him at all. So I'm with you there. To me, the biggest fantasy storyline that came out of the Baltimore game, other than Tyler Huntley looking great, and you feel confident that if Lamar Jackson's going to miss next week as well, you feel confident in the skilled players around Huntley, is that it felt like there was a changing of the guard at the running back position, because Devontae Freeman had dominated this backfield for a long time, including last week, but Latavius Murray looked like the better running back and certainly had the better numbers. Played more, had more snaps, played more, got more touches in this game. And I just thought that was interesting. Latavius Murray is out there in a ton of leagues. I don't know if you have decided whether or not is it a one-game thing? Do you want to wait and see? But do you think Latavius Murray makes your free agent fines column this week?
He does not make the free agent fines column for this week, because I think you're ultimately chasing a ghost, right? Like, he's got to be the only guy in the backfield that's getting touches. He's got to find the end zone. I just don't. I can trust that.
No passing game usage.
No passing game usage.
I want to ask you one question real quick before we close this out.
Okay.
We just talked about how awesome Tyler Huntley was, right?
Yeah.
Next week, I want you to look ahead. Tom Brady has no Mike Evans, maybe. Has no Chris Godwin.
You're crazy now, Daniel.
Has no Leonard Fournette.
Yeah.
Are you potentially looking to pick up Tyler Huntley and play him over Tom Brady with zero of his main skill position players?
Yeah. Who do the Ravens play?
Ravens play
At Cincinnati.
And who does Tom Brady play?
Carolina.
Yeah. And Tom Brady's still Tom Brady, right?
He is. Yeah.
Okay.
The Tom Brady that just scored 0 points against the Saints. Yeah.
But
Here's what I would say. I understand why you're asking the question. I know a lot of people have said that.
crazier
questions.
we totally have. I'm with you, Daniel.
Look, Davis Mills is a top 8 fantasy quarterback. I get it. Let's see. I'm with you. I mean,
no Mike Evans, no Chris Godwin. It's a conversation.
Yeah.
It's a conversation.
That's ridiculous, but it's a conversation.
But generally speaking, I'll just say this, and we'll get into our rankings for this week,
later on this week.
we'll see. We don't even know if Tyler Huntley's going to start next week. But I'll say just in general, I believe that when you bet against Tom Brady, you lose. And I think the odds of, I get it. No Chris Godwin, no Mike Evans, possibly no Fournette. That would be bad. But probably going to get Antonio Brown back. He'll have Gronk as well. They'll have a full week of practice with Scotty Miller, Brashad Perryman. Hopefully he comes back. I think he was on the COVID list, right? And Tyler, I don't know. Every single time people want to throw dirt on the grave of Tom Brady, he comes out and throws 5 touchdowns. I don't, you know what I mean?
But this isn't a Tom Brady thing.
Listen,
this is about how good Brett Hundley has looked too.
Well, not Brett Hundley, Tyler Huntley.
Tyler
They're very different. Yes, they are
It
very
happens.
different
A lot of
players.
people are doing that. Don't worry.
They're very different players. And Carolina has a good defense.
Yeah.
Daniel, to your point,
Yes, they do.
Carolina has
Yes,
a good
they do.
defense. He's going to be without a lot of guys. I get why you're asking the question. You have asked dumber questions. If I may
Yes,
compliment
thank you.
you.
That's all I
If I may
wanted.
compliment you,
That's it.
you have asked absolutely dumber questions than that one.
It's a wild thought that we're even entertaining such a matter, but that is week 15. If it taught us anything, do not ever think that fantasy football is
Who's the
predictable.
just since this is such a crazy let's predict one obscure player from each team tonight. from each game, I should say, from
so
each game tonight. Like
Browns, Raiders, who's the
right?
weirdo?
So who's like the obscure, like, you got to be kidding me, guy from one of those from the two games that goes off the.
Okay. I got Zay Jones.
Zay Jones is a good call.
That was who I was going to say. Zay Jones.
We can't all have the same one.
No,
though.
No, I know, but that
I'm gonna say quarterback Nick Mullins.
Nick Mullins, okay.
Oh,
Nick Mullins is gonna crush it
How
tonight.
about from the Vikings Bears game? What do you got?
from the Vikings Bears game.